Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
Beau Liegeois of Green Bay is a Democratic candidate in the 8th Congressional District. Beau, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for having me here today.
You say on your website that Congress has failed to act, quote, to meet the needs of the proud working people of Northeast Wisconsin. What should Congress do? What would you do if you're in the U.S. House?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, I think this Congress has totally failed us on health care. People want more access to affordable health care. They want to be protected for their pre-existing medical conditions, and they want equality in their health care system. And the bill that was passed by the House of Representatives in May of 2017, unfortunately did not become law, but our congressman here voted for it, did none of those things. And I think that was the opposite of the values of our community and what the people in Northeast Wisconsin wanted.
Would that have killed the ACA? That May 17, yeah, the May 17 vote?
Yes, I believe it effectively would have killed the Affordable Care Act, yes.
Is the ultimate answer a single-payer universal system? Well,
I do not think that we need to go that far.
Okay.
I'm focusing on increasing access to affordable health care by some of the things that I think that we can do immediately are I think that we should increase the level of tax credits for middle-class families to make the health insurance premium for them more affordable. And I think a second thing that we can do right away that seems like a very common sense thing is to allow the federal government to negotiate prescription drug prices for Medicare, just like they do for the VA.
So those would be the next immediate steps, but stop short of a single-payer system.
Correct. I do not think that we need a single-payer system.
Well, as an assistant district attorney, let's talk about a criminal justice issue. What's your views on immigration reform?
Yeah, I think that our immigration system is clearly broken. I think that that's a bipartisan failure for decades now. I do think that we should be giving our Border Patrol the resources that they need to secure our borders. But I think that is with increased staffing and electronic surveillance. I don't think that we need a physical wall. I don't think that is effective, and I also think it's a tremendous waste of our resources. I think that we can be building our infrastructure here in Northeast Wisconsin instead of building a physical wall. But there's also many sectors of our economy that rely on immigration, and I want that workforce to be coming into the country lawfully and legally and documented, particularly in our agricultural sector that relies on immigrant labor. And another factor from my experience in the criminal justice system is I want our immigrant communities to feel like they can participate in our criminal justice system. If they're the victim of a crime, particularly with domestic abuse, I think is where it comes up every once in a while, I want them to feel comfortable that they can report that crime to law enforcement and not have to worry about being deported or some negative action being taken against them.
It's such an important subject. Let's stay on this for a while. What your feeling on the options for Dreamers? What should happen with Dreamers?
Yes, I do support Dreamers and the DACA recipients. Going around the community, I've actually met a lot of DACA recipients who are very nervous about what's going to happen to them in the future. And if you've lived in our community for a long period of time, like DACA recipients have, and you contribute to your community and you pay taxes, I think that there should be a pathway to citizenship for those individuals.
For both Dreamers and the 12 or 13 million that are here illegally, there should be a path to citizenship. What should the steps be on that path to citizenship?
I don't have something specific on that issue, but that is something is an issue that repetitively I've said in this campaign that the House of Representatives should actually take the time to study and call people into open public hearings to actually come up with a real bipartisan solution. And I think that the House can only do that if they take the time to actually have open public hearings on it.
Your feeling on the President's tariffs with Canada, Mexico, and the North American trade agreement, is it hurting businesses in the 8th?
Yeah, absolutely, that 100%. I've heard that as a recurring theme in our community, that I'm all for taking on violators of and unfair trade practices in our international community. But when you start tinkering with international trade without having a comprehensive plan, and I think that everything that this administration is doing seems to be fairly random, and then it's always the consumer and the little guy that gets negatively caught up in this international trade war game. And we're seeing consumer prices go up, inflation is going up. There's just more tariffs yesterday that are going to impact everyday products that we buy here in our stores. I've heard from farmers that they've either had negative impacts already, or they're very nervous that it's going to happen in the near future. I talked to one farmer in Marinette County at the Marinette County Fair who said that they had a crop of soybeans and no buyer for their soybeans at the time I was talking to them. And they were nervous that they weren't going to be able to find a buyer, and that's because of the tariff, the trade war. Just earlier this week, I visited with a high school friend of mine named Tony. Tony runs a tent business right here in downtown Green Bay, where he receives raw materials, and then he takes the raw materials and he builds large tents, like wedding special event tents. He uses vinyl, he uses aluminum, and he uses steel. Vinyl he receives from China is now 25% tariffed. The aluminum and steel he gets from Canada is now 10% tariffed. Those are overnight costs that have been added to his business. So he's in this position where he either has to pass it on to his customers or he's got to eat that cost himself. And he's decided that he cannot pass that on to his customers. He has to, because he doesn't think he'd be able to compete as well with his competitors. So he's eating that cost himself on his business. And he told me that he was planning on hiring additional staff this year and growing his business, but now he's canceled those plans because of these additional costs that have been added to his business solely because of the actions of the administration. So I think that these are individual examples, real people in our communities who are feeling the effects of the tariffs, and either we should be ending the tariffs, or at the very least, Congress should be really asserting their authority, their legislative authority, to have a bigger say in the strategy with the tariffs.
But in campaigning, you must have talked to dairy farmers who have spoken to how Canada props up its milk produced in Canada. So one issue is our tariffs on China, but another is the North American trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. So do we need some correction of some imbalance with those two of our neighboring North American countries?
Absolutely. Obviously, our dairy industry is one of our most important parts of our economy right here in Northeast Wisconsin and throughout Wisconsin. And if there's unfair trade practices that are negatively impacting our farmers here, I will be aggressive in combating that.
Republicans have controlled Washington for years, but our national deficit has grown to $21 trillion. How significant a problem is that? And would you work to lower it? And how would you try to lower it?
Yes, it's absolutely a significant problem. And if you look at the numbers, it's projected to get as worse. The annual increase in our debt is projected to be the worst that it's ever been. And that's because we've not only increased spending in the last budget, but we've reduced substantially our tax revenue. So
would you have voted against that tax package?
Yes, I would have voted against.
Sorry for interrupting. Excuse me. Go ahead.
I would have I am open to tax reform, and I would certainly be willing to have a bipartisan negotiation to come together with a tax plan. And this is another example of where we should be having open public hearings about our tax policy in this country. I mean, it feels like they just kind of randomly picked a number to reduce the taxes to, particularly for corporations, and then that's why our debt is going to be ballooning, because they randomly picked a number. They didn't call anybody to publicly testify before the House why 21% was the perfect number to pick for the corporate tax rate, and now we're seeing substantial negative impacts in our budget because of it.
What changes in the nation's tax structure do you think might be justified to address the exploding debt?
Well, I think that a tax policy that works for the middle class is what's going to grow an economy and grow our tax base. When there's more money in the pockets of the middle class folks, that's when the economy starts growing exponentially, because it's the middle class who's out there spending money in our stores. They're out taking their family to the movies, taking their family out to restaurants, and when the middle class has more money in their pocket and the middle class is spending money, then everybody benefits, because it's the people at the top the corporations are going to benefit because their consumers are spending more money. So that's where I believe that our tax policy should focus on, is helping the middle class.
President Trump just signed a major increase in the budget of the Pentagon. Would you have voted for that increase?
My answer would be no, because they didn't pay for it.
Okay.
And they not only didn't pay for it, they reduced revenue substantially. And that's why our debt is ballooning this year at a rate that it's never ballooned before. I served as a judge advocate captain for 8 years in the Wisconsin National Guard. One of the duties of a judge advocate is to teach government ethics to all service members from the top down. And one of the things that I teach when I'm teaching the government ethics section of instruction is that you can serve and protect government property. And from my experience, all service members take that duty, that obligation very seriously to conserve and protect government property. So I want our Department of Defense, our military, to have the tools that they need to protect us. And I want them to be very open and honest about what they need to protect us and secure our country. But I don't want to be giving them more than what they're asking for. And I think that when Washington politicians are accepting corporate PAC money, I think that influences the way that they allocate our government resources. I myself am not taking any corporate PAC money, so I'm going to continue to conserve and protect government property when I'm sent to Washington.
Are you going to be able to raise enough funds with that limit, not taking PAC money, to be competitive in this 8th district race?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a fundraising rate, just calling individual donors and convincing people that I'm the right one to represent this district. I'm at a fundraising rate where I'm going to be able to do everything that I want in this race and accomplish all my goals. I have no idea why people think that they need to raise millions of dollars to run a congressional election, from my experience. So, I think it's because they have way too much overhead. They have way too many expenses on their campaign, whereas I'm a much more frugal person, and I count pennies, and I'm going to bring that strategy to Washington with me.
Let's go back to military spending for a minute. We've been a part of the war in Afghanistan 15, 16, 17 years. Is it time we withdraw our troops from Afghanistan?
No, I do not think it's time that we withdraw our troops from Afghanistan. I would follow the advice of the generals that are on the ground at the time that this is happening, but remember that is where the September 11th attack was the mastermind was located. So I mean, the war in Afghanistan is a vital war to our national security. We need to make sure that is a secure country that is favorable to the United States and no longer a threat to us. And I think that we should be bringing together all of the international actors in that area to try to wind down that war to a conclusion. But I would not set an actual withdrawal date from Afghanistan.
Northern Wisconsin is getting older, so I assume the 8th Congressional District is getting older. Social Security is projected to run out of money. I think the new date is what, 2036? How would you change Social Security to make it viable for the next generations?
Yeah, well, just as a general principle, I think Social Security has been a program that has worked exactly the way it was planned to work, to everybody pay into it while they're of working age, and then it's a guaranteed benefit after retirement. And the whole point of it is to protect the most vulnerable people in our communities from the ups and downs of the economy. And that's exactly what happened in the Depression before we had Social Security. Mm-hmm. So conserving and protecting Social Security as a guaranteed benefit for our retirees is a substantial priority of mine. What I will not do is vote to take away the trillions of dollars of surplus that the Social Security Administration has built up in preparation for the baby boomer generation that my incumbent opponent here in this district did back in April.
We talked about health care earlier, but Medicare is also scheduled to go bankrupt quicker than Social Security. Do you want to talk about potential fixes to the Medicare system?
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned one
You did.
earlier about allowing the federal government to negotiate prescription drug prices for Medicare, which I think would have a significant positive impact immediately if the federal government was allowed to do that. And that just seems like such a common sense solution that I think it's an example of how Washington is so broken that they can't come together to do something that seems like it would have unanimous support. My father is a recipient of Medicare right now. My father has Parkinson's disease. So I mean, I don't even know where my family would be at right now if we didn't have Medicare, which my father paid into it his whole life for that benefit. So that is another program that I will be fighting to preserve as a guaranteed benefit for our retirees.
Some Democrats in Washington mention the I word, impeachment, in connection with President Trump. Where are you on that issue?
Now remember that I'm a prosecutor.
I know.
So I have very specific ethical obligations.
You're a county prosecutor.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. The word impeachment shouldn't even be said until the investigation is over.
Okay.
So, and that's my position on it. I mean, I bring up that I'm a prosecutor because I don't charge a case before my police officers are done investigating a case. I want all of the facts, and I want to be able to analyze it, giving the subject the benefit of presumption of innocence, and making sure that all the elements are met before a procedure like that even goes into effect. So that's, and honestly, no one in this community is talking about impeachment.
Okay.
They're talking about better health care, they're talking about better paying jobs, and they're talking about protecting our water quality in this district. They're not talking about that.
Water quality is an issue, especially in Kewaunee County. Is that a federal or a state issue?
The answer is both.
Both.
Yes.
What can the feds do given the groundwater contamination?
Yeah, this is actually something that I've been talked about pretty frequently on the campaign trail. Just the general water quality issues that we have in our entire district that are significant, and this one is of primary importance because it's pretty ridiculous that you can't drink the water coming out of your own kitchen tap in the 21st century in the United States. And I did host a water quality roundtable with Senator Hansen and Senator Frostman several weeks ago, where we did bring together experts. And this is a very unique geographical area where in some places there's only a couple feet of topsoil, and that's why the agricultural byproducts go directly into the groundwater, particularly in Kewaunee County. But it absolutely is a problem that should be addressed at every level of government. One of the things that came out during our roundtable discussion was that nothing was really being done until the Environmental Protection Agency, the federal agency, kind of stuck its head in there and said, hey, this is a pretty significant problem, you need to start looking into this. And then at that point, the state started taking some action and instituted the full-scale study of the problem. Some of the solutions that I think for that area will be actually funding the enforcement bodies. I think that enforcing the laws that are on the books right now would go a long way to alleviating the problem.
Do we need a moratorium on CAFOs?
No, I don't think that we need a moratorium on CAFOs. We just need to be enforcing the laws and regulations that are on the books right now. And I don't think that the enforcement body is being invested in to the level that it should be.
I understand that you don't want to use the I word, impeachment. I get that. But what are your concerns about President Trump's leadership?
Well, one significant mistake that I think that he made right away in the beginning, and I don't think that it's unique to him, I think that many administrations make the same error, is that instead of doing something that both sides can agree on in a bipartisan way, and I would throw out an infrastructure bill as an example. Both sides talked about that a lot during the 2016 election. I mean, he went around saying that we have third world airports in our country. So instead of doing something that we all can agree on, he chose to do something that's the most divisive thing that we can do, and that was the healthcare bill. So, and I think that was a big mistake right from the beginning. Instead of working together on something and building up that rapport between the two parties, that he chose to do something that's the most divisive.
Well, which gets us into the issue of the nation's infrastructure with highways, bridges. The federal gas tax hasn't been raised in decades. Is that one solution to help us maintain our highways, bridges, and other transportation systems?
I would say no, because that's something that the middle class is going to feel the burden of more than the higher class. And I think that the only reason that you're even asking about that is because we've slashed corporate taxes so low in this country.
And so corporate tax rates should be hiked?
They should be at a much more appropriate rate. Alleviating some of their tax burden is something I'm willing to consider, but it's something that should be done in open public hearings. I think that the CEOs of corporations should testify in front of Congress and tell us why they think that a lower tax rate is going to benefit our country.
House candidates like you who are Democrats are being asked this question. Should Nancy Pelosi continue to lead your party in the House?
No, I'm not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi
Why?
for Speaker of the House if
you're elected?
when Democrats take control of the House next year. And that's very simply because I'm in this race to bring new leadership to Washington. I'm not in this race to bring old leadership, former leadership, back to Washington.
Now, you've been working as a Brown County ADA. Now you're traveling throughout the entire 8th Congressional District as a Democratic candidate. What have you learned about the district that you didn't know given your career just at Brown County?
Yeah, well, I've lived in this area my entire life, so I mean, a lot of the events I've gone to are events that I've been going to my whole life. My father was from Marinette, and that's where my grandparents lived their entire life, so I mean, Marinette.
So your roots are in the 8th?
Yeah, so
okay.
Marinette's basically like a second home to me, and
okay.
My grandfather was on the radio for 30 years in Marinette before he passed away in 1982. But I think one thing that's unique about this year is that everybody is willing to listen to what any candidate has to say this year, and I think that's the way it should be, and I'm very appreciative that people are willing to hear me out before they make their decision in November.
Specific differences with the incumbent that you're challenging you want to highlight?
It's night and day when it comes to health care. He voted to take away health care from millions of people. He voted to take away protections from people with pre-existing medical conditions. That's the opposite of the values that I was taught growing up in this community my entire life. We need to increase access to affordable health care, and we need to protect people with pre-existing medical conditions. Protecting people with pre-existing medical conditions should be non-negotiable for the voters in Northeast Wisconsin.
Beau, thank you. Beau Liegeois of Green Bay is a Democratic candidate in the 8th Congressional District. The election is November 6th. Beau, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.